Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
The big question, though, of course, for our listeners is, will you grow a beard? Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip, news and stories from GB News' studio in the heart of Westminster. My name is Christopher Hope. I'm GB News' political editor. Parliamentary summer recess has fallen upon us, and the Tories mark that moment by reshuffling their front bench team. And one person to survive that is the party's shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. And Chris Philp joins me now on the podcast. Chris, great to see you in person in our studio here at GB News.
Chopper, it is a great pleasure to be here with you.
Were you worried that you might lose your job and move on? I mean, you never know in politics. Your careers were the subject to the capricious nature of leaders.
Well, you know, you always wonder, of course, but I think since being appointed last November, I've got stuck into this brief with gusto and energy. So I'm very glad to still be doing this.
Energy, I think, is a word which Labour use about you a lot. You seem to be getting under their skin, don't you? Which is exactly what you should be doing as the opposition front bench.
That is my job. Labour are making a massive mess of the country, whether it's the economy, whether it's taxes going up, unemployment going up, or whether it's immigration getting out of control. They are making a mess, and it's my job in opposition to hold them relentlessly to account for that. And every single minute of every single day, I'm thinking about how I can do that, whether it's in Parliament, whether it's on the mainstream media, or whether it's on social media. I'm getting stuck in the whole time.
We'll come to that in a minute. So you appear to enjoy it. You are enjoying opposition, aren't you? I mean, in a funny way, you're enjoying opposition. You've got to be in power.
I mean, I'd much rather be in government because, look, I set up and ran my own businesses for 15 years before getting into Parliament. And
what area were they in?
So I ran a logistics business, which I set up when I was 22, started driving the delivery van myself. And then about 4 years later, it was turning over about 80 odd million pounds a year. And eventually we floated it on the stock market. And then I ran a series of investment businesses after that. So I always in business wanted to get things done. And I ran for Parliament and to get into public life to get things done as well. Now, in government, you can get things done, but in opposition, you can't. You're just commenting on things. So I do find that frustrating because I want to change things. I want to make things happen.
You're a doer.
I'm a doer. But, you know, within the constraints of being in opposition, I mean, being Shadow Home Secretary is definitely a job I'm very, very happy doing. And I get stuck in every day and hold the government to account. And, of course, start developing new ideas as well.
Well, we'll come to that in a minute, of course. I mean, yes, you move the dial, don't you? That's what you do if you're in opposition. Just some quick tips here. No one's listening, just you, me, and the microphones. When you're sitting there looking at Labour in front of you, what are you... Because you're talking quite a lot. What kind of things are you saying? You're trying to put them off, aren't you?
Oh, you mean at Prime Minister's questions?
Well, or even in Home Affairs.
Yeah, so often at PMQs, I sit next to Kemi or very close to her. And of course, I did stand in for her against Angela Rayner a few weeks ago. But when I'm sitting next to Kemi, when Keir Starmer says something that he just either doesn't answer the question or says something that's just straight up untrue, like he claims there was a black hole, which is just not true. You know what? I just can't help myself. I just can't help myself but to shout at him. And he can hear it as well. He can hear it. And
we can't hear above, so we're looking down from our gantry in the press gallery. We can't hear what's being said.
Yeah, so when he starts, talking about the economy, for example, I will shout at him, the economy is shrinking, or unemployment is going up. Or, if he talks about immigration, the Channel boats, I'll say, look, it's gone up. It's worst year ever.
Yeah, I just up, we'll point down.
That's right. And I just can't help it. I know I should try and stay a bit quieter, and the speaker occasionally pulls me up, but he drives me bananas, and I just can't help it.
And it does get under their skin. They refer to it. That guy Chris Philp, who seems to be quite energetic. Well, you are. That's who you are. And you're using PQs, parliamentary questions, FOI, Commons Library notes to make your case, aren't you? Trying to find ways into the government.
Yeah, we're trying to extract information the whole time to expose what they're doing. Whether it's failing to deport enough foreign criminals, for example, or whatever, or the fact they've got more illegal immigrants in asylum hotels than at the time of the last election. We're trying to get under the skin of that, expose the truth. It can be quite hard because they sometimes refuse to respond to freedom of information requests. So I've actually gone and complained to the Information Commissioner's office because they're not delivering the information they should do. So I'm on at them the whole time, and I will never give up until we get what we need.
And you also know what to ask, don't you? Because you or your colleagues were in power, so you know where the problems are. Must make you a bit of an irritant to them.
Yeah, so having obviously been a minister in the government previously, we do, I guess, know how to ask these questions and how to get the information. And as I say, the approach I'm taking is just to be like totally relentless the whole time.
And the problem you have, I suppose, is you were in power for 14 years and you didn't fix the problems, and we're only 8 months in or 12 months into a new government, so they can always say, why didn't you do it?
Yeah, and of course, personally, I was never the Prime Minister. I was never the Home Secretary. No. I was never the Chancellor. So I wasn't.
Listeners, what you were the policing minister. You were a period where you were in the Treasury as a Chief Secretary of the Treasury, and also you were shadow leader. You were leader of the House.
Shadow leader. And I was Technology Minister.
That's right.
When we had record ever inward investment, and when I was Police Minister, we got record ever police numbers as well. But no, I was never Home Secretary. I was never Prime Minister. Yes, look, the last government did make some mistakes, to be quite honest. Taxes ended up being higher than I wanted. And of course, Labour have now put them up even more. Legal migration was far too high, particularly in that 2 or 3 year period after COVID. And I've been very honest with the public and said that was a mistake, in fact, a catastrophic mistake. That should never have been allowed to happen. And that's why when I was appointed Shadow Home Secretary just a few months ago, one of the first policies I worked on with Kemi was introducing this idea of a binding annual cap set by Parliament. So when you're at a very low level, so when that cap is hit, we just stop giving out visas. So we can never again see these huge numbers coming in. And in fact, although numbers have come down quite a lot, thanks to changes made late in the time of the last government, they're still too high.
Family members, isn't it, that change?
It's family members and it's salary thresholds. But it's, in my view, it's still too lax. There are still, even today, too many people coming into the country who don't have high levels of skill, who are not earning high wages, who are not making a contribution. It's putting pressure on housing. It's putting pressure on social cohesion. It's fracturing society. I don't think a nation state or a society can function if it gets fractured. So the numbers, in my view, are still today far too high.
And we'll come to that in a second. Just on that apology, we got it wrong was what Kenny Badenoch said. I mean, she's apologised once. I just feel I want more apologies from this party before we can come back into government. Do you agree with that? I mean, you're saying we just done a catastrophic a mistake. I think, I just wonder whether apologising once is enough. Keir Starmer apologised for 2 years about Jeremy Corbyn and then got the right to be listened to.
Well, I mean, I think Kemi and I have both been clear about the mistakes made in the past, actually not just by the last government, but successive governments over many years. We've been really clear about that. But more than acknowledging those mistakes, we've come up with concrete, credible ideas for how to fix it. I mentioned one a second ago, a binding annual cap on migration.
Very
by
attractive.
Parliament.
What about hospitals? Imagine it's a financial year, you get to December, 8 months in, and they say we've got a winter flu crisis, we need more nurses. You say, sorry, the cap was spent by November.
Well, you know what? Only a tiny percentage of inward migration are doctors and nurses. It's a tiny, tiny percentage is the first point. Secondly, there are actually UK-trained doctors struggling to find places. So it's crazy that there are UK-trained doctors.
Totally, yeah.
Exactly, and people will say that. It is crazy we have UK-trained doctors not able to get places when instead they're being shipped in from outside Europe. We're not training enough nurses. We need to be focusing on people here already doing key jobs, especially jobs that don't require much training, like working in the social care sector. We've got 9.5 million people in this country of working age who are economically inactive. We should be getting them into work instead of paying billions of taxpayers' money to have them out of work while we ship in loads of people from overseas. It is bananas and it's got to stop.
For me, Brexit was a challenge to employers and a government to look after your own and deal with who's here. Don't bring in cheaper labour from overseas. And that's why the border issue is, I think Brexit has made that challenge to government and employers, and they haven't yet met that challenge yet.
No, it's got to change. We had, in the years after COVID, when the Brexit transition period ended, we had far too many people coming in to do low-skill, low-wage jobs. That actually ends up costing the taxpayer money because they consume more in services than they pay in tax. It puts massive pressure on housing. Over half of housing supply for the last 10 years has gone to migrants. And it doesn't help productivity because businesses, instead of investing in technology or mechanization, instead just import cheap labour, while there are 9.5 million people of working age who are not working. Now, some of those, have caring responsibilities or they're studying, but millions of those people, I mean, in my estimation, probably 3, 4, 5 million of those people.
Last week on that.
Should be working. And it's costing us billions to have our own existing people, residents here, not working while we ship people in. It's insane. It's got to end. And this cap will do that. And businesses will have to change their approach. They'll have to invest in technology and mechanisation, and they'll have to recruit more amongst people who live in the UK
that step
already.
Change and make them do it. Just briefly on Brexit, you voted against Brexit. Do you regret that now?
Look, I think I never look backwards. I'm a Democrat.
I have to look at your record as a journalist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely, as the minute that result came in June of 2016, I completely accepted that result because I believe in democracy. And I then, in Parliament, did everything possible to make sure that democratic decision was respected. I was also very clear. I voted against all of these weird halfway options where people were saying, oh, well, we should leave the European Union but stay in the customs union or stay in the single market. I thought that was bananas because we would have had to accept their rules with no say over them. That would have been the worst of all worlds. So I was quite happy, very happy, in fact, to support Boris's kind of clean Brexit, which he delivered just after the 2019 election.
So you would vote Remain again, wouldn't you, by that answer?
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think I haven't really thought about it. I think we've done well outside the European Union. There are obviously positives and negatives, right? We get our access to the single market is not as clean as it used to be, but we're saving, obviously, whatever it was, 10 or 12 billion pounds a year. And we get to do our own trade deals around the world, which was not possible inside the European Union. And we get to have more agile, pro-growth regulation. So there are a lot of benefits, which I'm excited and enthusiastic about. And look, I think we're going to make a great success. We are making a success, I think, when we were in government. Unfortunately, since the last election, Keir Starmer has squandered a lot of that with all these tax increases and regulation increases, which is undoing the good economic work we were doing.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance. And that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
What I like about Brexit is it simply puts all the responsibility back on elected politicians. That you can't. A third of the laws were decided by unelected officials in Brussels. It's now all on people like you. And if you don't do good enough job, you're out the door. Bring in Labour. If they fail, you come in. It's connecting power to the people again, and I like that idea.
I think that's a really good point. So no longer can governments of either colour hide behind Brussels or hide behind European Union regulation. But of course, their
own problems they create.
That's right, and be accountable to the electorate if they don't fix them. But there are, of course, still bits of law which do constrain governments and ministers. I'll mention a couple of examples. I mean, things like the excessive use of judicial review to stop governments doing things. Acts like the Climate Change Act, for example, stops like oil and gas drilling, which I strongly support. I support more oil and gas. And of course, the Human Rights Act and ECHR, which I've seen in government stopping our democratically elected government doing what the public expects.
You're part of that review now, but with Kane Badenoch.
Yes, it's being led by David Wolfson, Lord Wolfson. So I've already said, actually...
what's your position on this? So do you want to leave the ECHR?
So let me talk through it. So firstly, I think we need to repeal the Human Rights Act for all immigration matters. What that does is it stops judges in the UK applying the ECHR to immigration matters, which they do on a daily basis.
That's the family life and so.
Yeah, and in a way that defies common sense. I'll give you one example. This is a UK judge, not a Strasbourg judge. There was a Zimbabwean paedophile due to be deported back to Zimbabwe, quite right to, as required by our law. But a judge said, no, if he gets sent back to Zimbabwe, he might get treated with some hostility. Well, that's not surprising. He's a convicted paedophile. And so the judge says, no, he can stay in the UK. Well, what about the human rights of children here to be protected from a dangerous paedophile and other foreign criminals? So judges have stretched the definition of these ECHR articles. It's not just Article 8, which is a family life. It's Article 3, freedom from torture, inhuman and degrading treatment as well, which when originally written 70 years ago meant don't send people to concentration camps. I mean, rightly, after the Second World War. But it's now been redefined by judges to say a paedophile can't get sent to Zimbabwe in case he encounters some hostility. It defies common sense. It's completely ludicrous. So the Human Rights Act has to go, certainly for immigration matters.
But not leaving ECHR.
Well, I think we probably do have to leave the ECHR, and that is what David Wolfson obviously is looking at to answer the question. So Kemi set, I think, 5 tests. He's checking out whether those tests can be met while in the ECHR. One of those tests, for example, is can we kick out every single foreign criminal, not just some foreign criminals, all of them.
10,400 in prison.
That's right.
They all go.
And another, about 17,000 roughly, almost 20,000, who are out of prison and just in circulation in the community. In my view, every single one of those, every single one should be deported back to their country of origin. If someone and by the way, these are just the ones who've had more than a year in prison. I think we should actually go broader. And people convicted of essentially any criminal offence outside of a parking fine or a TV licence should be in scope for deportation. Because if a foreign national, a foreign citizen comes here and commits a crime, they should just be returned to their country of origin. In my view, it's as simple as that.
Well, there we go. As Shadow Home Secretary, your big issue is small boats. Tackling the government on that. Small boats crossings up by a third, looking at a record level this year, maybe 50,000 this calendar year, looking at the trends. The Labour government blame your government, for too much focus on the Rwanda plan that they axed within 2 days of coming to power. Are they right? That allowed the numbers to build up in the hotels and that caused such tension locally.
No, they've got a brazen cheek. So let's put a few facts into this. So first of all, in our last full year in office, 2023, we actually got the small boat numbers down by about 30%. So we've got the numbers coming down, even though illegal immigration across Europe at that time was going up. We then had the Rwanda plan, which basically, just to summarise what it said, every single illegal immigrant crossing the channel from France, and they are all illegal immigrants because they're breaking the law, and they're coming from a safe country.
That's not accepted by some of the left, is it?
Well,
they do irregular migration rather than legal.
That is nonsense. When they use that word, it drives me bananas. It is illegal. It is contrary to Section 24 of the Immigration Act 1971. Right? It is illegal. They are illegal immigrants. And they're crossing from a safe country. Nobody needs to leave France to flee war. So every single one of those who arrives on the UK shore should be immediately, and in my view, without judicial process, removed either to their country of origin or to Rwanda if they can't be removed to their country of origin. And what you will find is that within a few months, like 2 or 3 months, people will simply stop making the attempt to cross. Because if you're in France, why would you cross the channel if you know for sure you're going to wind up in Rwanda? Now, and I know it's going to work. I mean, firstly, common sense says it'll work. But secondly, Australia did something very similar about 12 or 13 years ago. They called it Operation Sovereign Borders. They actually had an even bigger problem. It was the numbers there were higher than we're experiencing. They were going from Indonesia to Australia. Now, Australia used a little island called Nauru rather than Rwanda. But the principle is the same. And what we saw within a few months was the numbers crossing the sea or the ocean towards Australia went down to zero.
Anecdotally, we reported, and we saw reporting on this, that Rwanda could have been working. It was holding people back from travelling across the channel during and before the election, and then also some leakage into Southern Ireland from Northern Ireland from people.
That's right. The Irish government were complaining that illegal immigrants in the UK were crossing over to Dublin to avoid Rwanda. So we've got a very, common sense tells you it would have worked. The Australian example tells you it would have worked. And we saw some behaviour changes in the weeks leading up to what should have been the commencement date. Of course, the scheme never actually started because we had to work through various legal challenges, both in Strasbourg and in the Supreme Court, which used the ECHR. We had to pass a law, which Labour are now repealing, stupidly. And the first flight was due to take off on the 24th of July. Now, perhaps Rishi should have called the election a bit later.
Should he, yes or no?
Well, I think he should, yeah. He should have called it later. Of course he should. Of course he should, yeah. Especially my colleagues who unfortunately ended up losing their seats. So yeah, he should have called the election later. We could have got our first flight away. What Starmer did, as you said already, is within a couple of days of being elected, he cancelled that Rwanda flight before it was due to fly, just like a week or two before it was due to fly. And what have we seen subsequently? His replacement plan was to, quote, smash the gangs. It's a ludicrous joke. If you notice, the Labour Party now do not mention their smash the gang phrase. That has now been Tipexed out of their lexicon because they never mention it. But it's sort of laughable because it obviously hasn't worked. And numbers crossing the channel since the election have gone up by about 40%. This year so far, 2025 so far, has been the worst in history for illegal channel crossings. It's up by, I think, 52% compared to the same period last year. So their smash the gangs thing is a laughable joke. And now they're going to send 50 people a week to France, which will make no difference at all.
That's also a test, see if it works, like your two going to Rwanda, to be fair to them. Wait and see if that works. They say to us that they blame the numbers in hotels on your government for focusing too much on Rwanda that they say wouldn't work, you say would have worked. And that has led to this tensions we're seeing around the country now with these hotels. The Metropole in Blackpool, for example. There's a hotel in Epping where there's tensions rising as we speak.
Well, look, I mean, the number of illegal immigrants accommodated in these hotels has actually gone up since the general election, right? That's on their watch. It is their fault. And we now know that lots of these illegal immigrants are committing criminal offences. And if you look at the reporting in The Sun and the Mail on Sunday, they listed all of these cases. There are hundreds and hundreds of illegal immigrants who have crossed the channel by small boat, who have been charged with these serious offences: arson, violence, theft. The list goes on and on. So this is now a public safety crisis, especially for women and girls, as well as a border security
are rising.
crisis.
Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, he's warned of a societal collapse. Is he right? Is he fanning the flames? There's issues in Epping. We're seeing that on our social media and in coverage too. Do you worry about riots this summer?
Yeah, so just to be clear, violent protest is not justified in any circumstances because we are a democracy. We settle these issues by debate and by elections, not by violence, whatever the issue is. But people are very, very rightly very concerned about this, and they've got a government who is not taking action. And I think it's the way that in opposition, whether it's Nigel Farage or me or Kemi, we need to hold the government to account.
Is it a right-wing issue? We hear
try and force change.
Is it a far-right issue?
No,
that's what we hear.
It's not a far. No. That's nonsense. It is not. To be clear, it is not a far-right issue to stand up for border security. It's not far-right. Just as when Keir Starmer said in January that it was a far-right bandwagon to raise the grooming gang scandal, he smeared campaigners and he smeared me and Kemi as being part of a far-right bandwagon for saying we need a proper national inquiry into the cover-up.
That was my question to him in that hospital when he said that.
Oh, it was your question? Right.
Yeah, well, I said to him, we've found evidence of my colleague Charlie Peters, 50 towns. Do you want the evidence? And he doubled down on this idea of a far-right bandwagon.
Yeah, that was disgraceful. And I've been...
You're very upset by that, aren't you?
Because he was talking about, not just me and Kemi, he was talking about campaigners who were campaigning for the truth to come out, and he smeared them. Keir Starmer smeared them. It is not a far-right bandwagon to stand up for young girls who were systematically groomed and raped by gangs of predominantly Pakistani heritage men. And it's not a far-right bandwagon or a far-right issue to stand up for border control and to want people who come here illegally to be immediately removed. That's not far-right. It's standing up for our national interest.
And just on that, again, you were in power for 14 years. Before that, Labour for the previous 10 years. And these issues go back into the last century, don't they, on grooming gangs? And all politicians didn't grip it.
Well, I think more should have been done. I mean, to be fair, Theresa May set up the original J inquiry, I think, into Rotherham.
Nothing happened.
Theresa May set up the ICSA inquiry. Rishi Sunak, to be fair, set up the grooming gangs task force that led to 550 arrests in the first year. But what appalls me is that many of these perpetrators still have not been prosecuted, but also people in positions of authority, particularly local council leaders and actually some senior police officers, didn't just ignore this issue, they deliberately covered it up, and not a single one of them has yet been prosecuted for the crime of misconduct in public office, and I think they should be.
Well, I'm waiting to see how this inquiry will be structured. There's a national inquiry looping in local inquiries. I'm not entirely sure how that will be. It must have the statutory powers that you want it to have.
That's right. I'm a bit sceptical about the government's position on this. It's got, as you say, it's got to have those statutory powers, which means it can compel witnesses to appear and it can requisition evidence. There is, we've seen last year, as recently as last year in Greater Manchester, the authorities there refused to cooperate, refused to produce evidence to the local inquiry there, which Andy Burnham set up, to his credit. That did not have statutory inquiries, and so the local authorities just didn't cooperate properly.
Do you think Keir Starmer might be nervous about his record as DPP in this?
I think he might be. I think he's certainly nervous about Labour councils, which actively covered this up, and the Crown Prosecution Service, particularly early on, did make some mistakes.
He says he pushed it through the first prosecutions, didn't he, in 2013 or 14? Well, he says that.
I think that was led by Nazir Asfal, who was the chief Crown Prosecutor in the Northwest at the time. And there were cases a little earlier than that, right. In about 2008 or 2010, when there was one case when I think a victim was branded by the CPS as a co-conspirator, which is disgraceful. And another case, I think, where there was DNA evidence on a girl's underwear, and the Crown Prosecution Service said there wasn't enough evidence to proceed. Well, I mean, I don't think evidence can come any clearer than that. So, yes, the Crown Prosecution Service do have questions to answer
and
as
he
well.
has questions as former DPP, you think?
I think that, yes, because the CPS, particularly in those early years, didn't respond adequately at all, just like the police and local authorities didn't either.
You mentioned earlier your activity on social media. Let's play a clip of what you got up to with a homeless encampment in Park Lane, London.
Look, for me, yes. These people, it's not okay, it's racist.
It's not, honestly,
no respect.
It's not racist to raise issues like this.
These people,
it's not. If you're allowed to work, you should apply for a job.
What's it like doing that? Was it a bit risky? I mean, you're walking around amongst people there. You'll say, "Why are you here? What's going on?"
Yeah, look, I mean, I got aggressively shouted at by a few people, but look, I think it's part of the job actually to try and expose what's going on. So they were they were entirely Romanian and Bulgarian.
So an encampment, wasn't it, on the central sort of reservation on that road there?
That's right, opposite the Hilton on Park Lane. And I went there to find out what was going on, to ask them why they were there. I think, frankly, the government and the authorities should be removing them back to Romania and Bulgaria. They're clearly not engaging in, economically productive activity.
No.
So they should be, frankly, removed. Interestingly, even though that site had been there for quite a while and is controlled by Sadiq Khan as the Mayor of London, it's a Transport for London bit of land, the day after I visited, suddenly they got moved. But it shouldn't take a visit by the Shadow Home Secretary to shame Sadiq Khan into action.
We're seeing increasingly this, aren't we, on social media, people taking matters into their own hands. Even we heard Nigel Farage say his family member's phone was stolen in Victoria. It ended up in an address in Buckinghamshire. He didn't go and try and get it. But do you think people should do it? It's risky, isn't it, if you become vigilantes in our own country?
Well, I think it's just part of the job for me to try and expose these things.
Should other people do the same as you? Take on wrongdoing?
So I think
film it?
I think people should be calling out wrongdoing, actually. Okay. I mean, it's up to them to decide whether they feel it's safe, and that's for each person to make a judgment. But I think it's reasonable for the public to call out and expose criminality where it occurs.
Put your camera on, film it.
For example, yeah,
and just say, why have you walked through behind me in this gate, in this tailgating me in a transport situation?
Yeah,
yes,
I agree. I think
violence.
I think exposing that kind of thing is important.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, let's see how that goes. You also mentioned, we mentioned Nigel Farage. That's the biggest challenge to your party is how to tackle Nigel Farage. He's got a big month in August on law and order. Do you worry about that? That's your space too, of course.
Well, what we're doing is coming forward with like credible, properly worked up plans rather than slogans. So when yesterday or last week, I think it was, he came up with some policy ideas, which by his
£17.4 billion
by his own admission cost over £17 billion exactly. And when asked how he would pay for it, didn't have an answer. Now, I think anyone...
He said it's cutting HS2 and cutting net zero.
Yeah, but I mean, the net zero money he spent about... Well, first of all, it's not actually that much, but he's spent it about seven times over.
£40 billion, so cutting that would be...
But he spent that money about 6 times over. And quite a lot of that money isn't savings for the government, it's savings for business and consumers, right? So the government can't then spend that, unless he proposes to increase taxes. So I think, someone who is aspiring to government needs to do the public the service of actually coming up with ideas that have been properly thought out.
It's frustrating because he can say 30,000 police officers, halving crime within 5 years, deporting all 10,400 foreign national prisoners. He can say these things, can't he? And people are listening to him. He's setting the agenda. people are covering it, aren't they? And you're trying to be more disciplined with what you're up to.
Well, I think so. Our objectives are in the immigration and crime space are just as radical. I want to deport all foreign criminals, but the difference between us and reform is that rather than just shooting from the hip and just saying it without thinking about it properly, we're actually developing the credible plans to work out how to do it in practice. And I think the choice the electorate are likely to have at the next election is between a Conservative Party that has done the thinking so we can actually implement these plans and make them work versus a party that has good slogans, yes, but not the detailed, credible plans.
Near the time that focus may come into it.
It may do. And on the economy, I mean, he's proposing to increase welfare spending by removing the 2-child benefit cap. Now, that obviously is going to cost a fortune. It'll mean higher taxes. But I think it's also morally questionable, because why should hard-working taxpayers, who probably limit themselves to just 1 or 2 children because they can't afford any more, why should they work night and day, pay taxes to subsidise somebody else to have like 5 or 6 kids?
He now says it's indigenous people, by the way, on that, which also, I don't know how on earth you do that. I mean, if you're living here for a while, can you, I don't know.
I mean, he's making up as he goes along.
Yeah, well, he just has their aspirations rather than policies too. So I think, and that's...
I mean, I think that rather illustrates the point, doesn't it?
Difficult for you.
No, it's not. It's difficult for him because he says stuff, and then he realizes a few days later it doesn't quite work. So
your plans this summer, you may be called out of your sunbed to combat Farage's attacks on law and order, or will you'll be?
Look, I'm gonna stay active as always,
of course,
and
this summer,
I'll be busy. Don't worry about that. And I think delivered record ever police numbers when in government, and I want to see zero tolerance on crime, and I'll probably be out and about with my video recorder tracking down criminals myself.
We'll wait to see. The big question, though, of course, for our listeners is: will you grow a beard? Because you had a beard, didn't you, before the election, and I was told it was a turn-off for voters.
No, that is not true. So I did suffer a backlash on the beard.
Did you?
But it came, amongst others, from my 12-year-old daughter, and unfortunately, faced by a backlash from my 12-year-old daughter, the beard had to go.
Yes. Why did you grow a beard?
Well, I actually quite liked it. And I did. Apart from there's a grey patch on my chin, which I was a bit less keen about.
That will spread as you get older.
Is that right? Well, there's a reason not to let it grow back. But I quite liked it. But it was, my daughter strongly objected.
So it wasn't an issue for voters. A politician with a beard is less trustworthy than a clean-shaven Adonis like you are.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. That wasn't the reason. Okay. It may be true, but it wasn't the reason.
Now, in response to those claims by Chris Philp about Sir Keir Starmer and the grooming gang's inquiry when he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, a Labour spokesperson told us this. As the country's chief prosecutor, Keir Starmer changed the criminal justice to better support victims of grooming gangs. When Chris Philp had the chance, he did nothing. Keir Starmer gave victims new rights and forced prosecutors to take their claims seriously. Compare that to Chris Philp's record as the Minister for Policing and Crime in the 2 years in the run-up to the election. Not a mention of the issue of grooming gangs in any of his speeches in the House of Commons. No meeting with any external individual or organisation to discuss the issue of grooming gangs. Not one victim, not one expert on sexual abuse, not one local authority, not one local police force. This Labour government is taking the strongest action any government has taken to tackle grooming gangs and child sexual exploitation in our country. A new national inquiry, more police investigations, more arrests, new protections for children, and a complete overhaul of the way organisations work and share information to protect children. Chris Philp, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Have a great summer. We'll get you back on the channel again repeatedly, I'm sure. But thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's always a pleasure to be here with GB News. Thank you.
I tweet to Christopher Hope on X. Email me chopper@gbnews.uk. What's your Twitter handle, Chris Philp?
I've got a feeling it's at CPhilp or Chris Philp official, I think.
Fine.
Maybe with an MP on the end. If you search it on Twitter, you'll find it.
Send him your message and watch all of his output on social media this summer there. If you enjoyed this show, please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, like Chris Philp has, give us a 5-star rating and your review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anywhere else where you get this podcast. That helps other people find this show and increases our audience. Thanks to the great team of colleagues behind the show, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh, and the podcast Worker Bees here in Westminster, Rebecca Nunes, and the bearded George McMillan. And most importantly of all, thank you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and George does, and Rebecca does, and certainly Chris Philp does, please do catch me during the week on GB News with our latest political stories and our scoops, and our best reporting on our website, gbnews.com. But until next time, have a great summer. Cheerio!